In the early 18th century in New York, shortly after British rule started, there was a shipment of enslaved people into New York. They were Akan from present-day Ghana. We believe that they had already been in battles in Ghana. When they came to New York, they decided to rebel against slavery. One night, they started a series of fires, and when whites came out of their houses, they attacked them. I think they hoped to kill enough whites and then gain their freedom. They also hoped to invoke an uprising among other enslaved people. They were quickly outnumbered by the white residents. They were captured, and many of them were executed. Every slave conspiracy has an effect on the slave society. Most immediately, the punishment of those enslaved people, selling them away, often very far away into places that are much more harsh, the execution of those accused, and the tightening of laws. In 1741, in contrast, we have a very different slave rebellion. It involves not only enslaved people, but also working-class whites. It had been a very difficult winter in New York. There had been a lot of hunger, loss of wages, and there had been a lot of talk in the taverns about the elites in that city and how they were not addressing the concerns of working-class people. Cuffee was Adolph Phillips's slave in New York City, and he ended up being one of the leaders of this conspiracy. He had been accused of being a member of the Geneva Club. Geneva is an 18th century word for gin. They were accused of imbibing in gin and then stealing gin and other goods. This uprising began in taverns where blacks and whites mixed. The 1741 conspiracy didn't only uncover the discontent of enslaved people, it also worried white New Yorkers that black and white working class people were getting a little bit out of control. And the greatest fear for slave owners is that their enslaved people who know them so intimately, are in their households with them, are attending to their most intimate tasks, will turn out to be their greatest enemies and will ultimately turn to murder. A group of enslaved people set a series of fires. One of the weapons of enslaved people in these wood-framed cities, whites feared arson throughout this time. Our main document is from the judge in the trial, Daniel Horse-Mandan, and he has a very prejudiced view, of course, of the conspirators. So when the investigation and then the trials began, both blacks and whites were on trial. But blacks really took the brunt of the punishment. Many of them were executed, hung, or burned at the stake after a series of trials. It's very likely to me that enslaved people, angry at the limits on their family life, their mobility, set the fires in order to strike some fear into the minds of whites. And that fear, they thought, might have led them to some kind of greater autonomy. Because no whites were killed, because the arson fires ended, and we're not sure, perhaps the confessions were coerced. There's a lot of gray areas with the 1741 conspiracy, very different from the 1712 conspiracy, where we have blacks and whites engaged in battle directly with each other.